countdown to congestion pricing.
What congestion pricing does, it allows us to have a safe, accessible station.
As drivers get ready to pay more.
Adding this proposed toll adds another $3,600 to my commute bill.
What the extra money means for mass transit.
Every dollar from congestion pricing will be dedicated to improving the mass transit system in the region.
And the legal challenges that could complicate it all.
The MTA is a money pit.
Fox 5 presents Taking Its Toll.
Good evening, I'm Steve Lacey.
And I'm Natasha Verba. Thanks for joining us for this special in-depth look at congestion pricing. The controversial plan to charge drivers entering Manhattan south of 60th Street got the final go-ahead from the MTA yesterday.
All right, some last-minute exemptions were made for school buses, commuter buses, and essential city vehicles, but the overall plan is moving forward despite several lawsuits. Next up, a 60-day public information campaign with a concurrent 30-day testing period before tolling officially begins in June.
So how did we get here, and what can we expect moving forward? Morgan Mackay breaks it all down.
Either the rider pays in fares and tolls, or it's congestion pricing.
That was then Governor Andrew Cuomo, who a few months later signed into law a first-in-the-nation congestion pricing plan in order to keep subway fares down while also increase revenue for the MTA. Now, 4 years later, congestion pricing is months away from being implemented. Supporters of the plan say that congestion pricing will reduce traffic and improve air quality in one of the most congested neighborhoods in the nation, while also generating $1 billion a year to make much-needed improvements to the MTA.
I passed by an ambulance on its way to NYU Langone Hospital. It was stuck in bumper-to-bumper, unmoving traffic, and I couldn't help but think about the poor person who may have been fighting for their life in that ambulance. But critics argue that drivers already pay hefty bridge and tunnel tolls to get into Manhattan and point to concerns about safety on mass transit.
This is nothing but a shameful money grab that will detrimentally hurt all of New York City's neighbors.
The congestion pricing fee structure was approved by the MTA board in early December of last year. Under the current plan, during peak hours on weekdays, vehicles will be charged $15 to enter Manhattan below 60th Street. That amount will then be cut by 75% during overnight hours. Trucks and buses will pay between $24 to $36. Taxis and for-hire apps will pay a smaller toll. Drivers using the Hudson River and East River tunnels will get a $5 discount, while both the FDR and West Side Highway would remain toll-free. There's also a discount program for low-income drivers and a tax break for low-income residents living in the zone.
Excess traffic congestion is costing the New York City region over $20 billion a year.
It's utterly unfair and ridiculous.
There are nearly a half-dozen lawsuits trying to block congestion pricing from going into effect. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy was the first to sue, calling the project a brazen money grab.
The MTA shouldn't be solving their financial crisis and mismanagement on the back of New Jersey commuters. It's that simple.
Staten Island Borough President Vito Fossella quickly followed, arguing that the borough's air quality will worsen because cars and trucks will be diverted to just outside of the tolling zone. More groups quickly joined in. The United Federation of Teachers, the city's Municipal Labor Committee, and a group of bipartisan lawmakers from the Hudson Valley who say their constituents don't have enough mass transit options.
Make no mistake, this rushed and shoddy plan is a tax on commuters. Many hardworking families in Orange and Sullivan counties will face a significant and long-term financial impact.
In a statement, Governor Kathy Hochul's office says, quote, Governor Hochul is committed to implementing congestion pricing to reduce traffic, improve air quality, and support the MTA, which millions of New Yorkers ride every day. Reporting from the newsroom, I'm Morgan Mackay, Fox 5 News.
Well, congestion pricing is expected to raise a lot of money for the MTA.
All right, but it's also raising a lot of questions about where all that money will go. Arthur Chian crunches the numbers.
The first thing to know when it comes to the MTA's finances is that the MTA has two budgets. The operating budget, which goes year to year, paying for things that run the system now, like the salaries of transit workers. And then there is the capital budget, and that's about the future, keeping the system in working condition and big improvements like expansions. Let's start with the good news. According to the State Comptroller's Office, the MTA's operating budget is in good shape, which has not always been the case by a long shot.
That's sort of unique for the MTA. We always hear about they're entering some kind of budget crisis, but with the actions of the state budget last year, we see substantial new funds, mostly in the form of tax revenues, take the place of the lost revenue that come from ridership drops due to the pandemic.
And then there's the capital budget, which is structured differently. Each plan covers a 5-year period instead of one, and is funded by borrowing and creating debt and federal funds. The MTA tells us their top priorities for the current capital plan is service, mainly keeping it safe and running reliably and frequently, and making the system more accessible. One of the most alarming issues are signal systems that in some places are nearly 100 years old, and today is a major contributing cause of service disruptions.
Signals are really critical because about a quarter of delays for the system from signals.
So how does this fit in with congestion pricing? There are a billion ways. Mainly, congestion pricing is built to raise $1 billion a year, all of which will go into the MTA's capital plan, not the operating budget. We wanted to know exactly how that $1 billion a year will be spent, so we asked the man at the MTA leading their capital projects, Jamie Torres Springer.
The big buckets of priorities are re-signaling some of the lines that haven't been as reliable, which means new modern signals. It improves track, it improves the equipment so that the trains can run more reliably. ADA accessibility, elevators at stations, more electric buses so that we can move to an electrified bus system, and a lot of state of good repair project. Those are the big areas for the $15 billion we'll support.
And this is where trust issues come into play. Over the years, the MTA has taken hits, whether for operating 2 sets of books to billion-dollar projects like East Side Access, bringing the LIRR into Grand Central. The budget ended up nearly quadrupling, costing an extra near $8 or $9 billion, and was supposed to be finished in 2009. It finally started running last year, just 14 years late. From the governor on down through the state agency, those who were responsible for financial fiascos like East Side Access are now gone. Whether Hochul now or MTA's Jano Lieber, the current leadership has a different track record. Torres Springer calls it the new MTA.
We've saved over $1 billion last year in recognition, lower bids from contractors, lower insurance costs, lowering the cost of doing business because we're delivering more reliably. And we're seeing big projects get delivered on time and on budget.
The State Comptroller's Office has also given the MTA credit, saying the agency has found ways to cut hundreds of millions of dollars in spending without affecting service. But they say the agency does have an Achilles when it comes to massive projects.
There's been a number of studies now that have suggested mega projects in particular, like the East Side Access project, ones that are over $20–50 million, quite frankly for the MTA over $1 billion, that they've had trouble sort of reining in the costs.
For that reason, watchdogs say they are watching to see if the projects that congestion pricing money goes towards deliver on their promise.
Let's see if those projects are actually delivering on what they said they would. And that just comes down to following each project as is and seeing where it tracks and whether or not it goes over schedule.
But for the MTA's finances, there is a far more pressing problem right now in the form of several lawsuits filed to try to block congestion pricing from happening. The MTA had planned to activate the gantries this May, and the delay is already forcing the MTA to put a freeze on multiple projects.
With each passing day with this litigation, because we can't yet rely on the funding, we have to put more and more work on hold.
And so a system designed to move is instead grinding to a halt. Arthur Chien, Fox 5 News.
Well, commuters in New Jersey facing other changes along with congestion pricing.
Whether you take the train or drive your car, why it's going to cost you more to get around.
It's hard for everyday commuters. It's too expensive.
We try to cross the crosswalk. It's full of cars. There's people in wheelchairs and strollers like navigating in between the cars. It's out of control.
Congestion pricing isn't the only increase drivers are facing. Tolls on the New York State Thruway went up at the start of the year and will rise again in 2027.
All right, in New Jersey, a toll hike just went into effect on the Turnpike in March, and the extra expenses don't end there.
Teresa Priello looks at the challenges of commuting in the Garden State.
There's no break at all where taxes or hikes are concerning anything. Every consumer is suffering.
There's no way out, or should we say in, for New Jersey residents looking to make it across the Hudson on the cheap. Congestion pricing due to hit New Jersey drivers particularly hard, since it comes on top of the other expenses they're already shelling out, like tolls and gas, and now fare and toll hikes.
Congestion pricing is ridiculous. They got to pay to cross the bridge, you got to pay to come to the turnpike, then you got to pay to get in Manhattan. It's ridiculous.
The problem with congestion pricing could be easily solved for some New Jersey residents by relying on mass transit. The problem with mass transit is that all too often it is unreliable. Add to that, there's now a proposal to hike fares 15%.
The fare increase that has been proposed is absolutely the wrong time, the wrong amount, and it's not going to fix the financial problems of the agency.
Zoe Baldwin is with the Regional Plan Association. They support congestion pricing as a method to reduce the reliance on cars in New York City, but they also believe that New Jersey's mass transit system, through NJ Transit, isn't at a place where it can replace car traffic.
Regional Plan Association absolutely acknowledges that fares need to go up sometimes, but not double digits, and not now.
There may be another way for commuters, and that's to drive to a place like Secaucus and park. The NJ Transit train trip is less expensive, and you won't pay for congestion pricing. But there's also a catch. March 1st, New Jersey Turnpike tolls went up 3%.
It's gonna kill the business, you know, because when the customer come in and they're going, they see the tolls and they're going crazy about the tolls. The fare plus toll, that's a lot for us.
This is the same proposal the governor vetoed last October. The governor's team says the turnpike toll hikes will help fund NJ Transit to the tune of $500 million annually. By responsibly investing in the maintenance of our state highways and mass transit, we are continuing to prioritize the safety and mobility of all New Jersey residents and commuters. The Regional Plan Association says that's not exactly the case.
Just to be clear, that toll increase is not because they are funding NJ Transit. It's because their capital plan to maintain those roadways absolutely needs that funding to advance.
It also raises the question of whether or not the tolls or fares are enough alone to bring our roads and rails up to speed. The RPA says it's not.
Fares don't pay for the system, and that's why it's so frustrating that we have these increases on the table. A 1% increase in fares for NJ Transit equals about $8 million in operating revenue. I don't know why we're going to riders before the state does its own due diligence, because riders have not seen an improvement in service.
The governor's office also told us Murphy looks forward to the public hearings on NJ Transit's fare hike as he continues to explore additional avenues to respond to NJ Transit's fiscal needs. One of the things that would help make mass transit more reliable would be a new rail tunnel under the Hudson River. But the Gateway project isn't expected to break ground until 2025, and it's expected to take about a decade to complete. In Secaucus, New Jersey, Teresa Priolo, Fox 5 News.
Well, subway safety is a big focus ahead of congestion pricing.
All right, with more people being encouraged to take mass transit, what's being done to address their crime concerns?
I'm afraid of the subway. The stuff I hear, people getting mugged and killed, and no, I don't ride the subway.
I'm not nervous at all. I'm born and raised in New York, so it's pretty much what happens. You just got to have your head in the swivel, pay attention.
Now, one of the main goals of congestion pricing is to get more people to use mass transit.
But as Linda Schmidt reports, ongoing concerns about crime on the subway could impact that.
Well, before the pandemic, about 6 million people a day took the subway. Now that number stands at about 4 million. But the MTA believes that once congestion pricing kicks in, more people will choose to take the subway instead of driving in the city. Recent high-profile crimes on the subway have shaken up some riders.
You think about this thing every day. The guns are out of control.
I don't know why they don't got metal detectors before you go in.
Earlier this month, a fight on the A train in Brooklyn turned into chaos. Gunshots fired as a packed train of terrified commuters dove for cover, trying to escape.
Let me out! Let me out!
In In mid-February, a gang-related shootout on the number 4 train in the Bronx killed an innocent bystander and injured 5 others. In January, a school crossing guard and father of 3 was fatally shot on the number 3 train in Brooklyn while he was trying to break up an argument. MTA Chair and CEO Janno Lieber has acknowledged on many occasions that riders need to feel safe.
We have made tremendous progress fighting back against transit crime with an amazing transit bureau. We're going to keep working at it every day.
Last November, an innocent bystander was shot in the ankle after 2 teenagers got into a fight on the C train in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. Later, at an MTA safety committee meeting, a city transit worker expressed his frustration with crime.
And just last night, 2 folks were shot, one being a teenager. The NYPD is not there. This board needs to come to that reality. They're not there. They're not making arrests.
The NYPD pushing back on that, saying subway arrests are up by more than 50% so far this year, compared to the same time period last year, while overall subway crime is about 4.5% higher. Mayor Adams had requested more money from the state to help flood the subway with more NYPD officers.
We want more visibility, more movement. We want officers walking through the trains, being at the platforms, being near the token booth.
But Governor Hochul had her own plan to help the city, deploying about 750 National Guard members as well as 250 state troopers to help the NYPD conduct random bag checks in some of the busiest subway stations. The head of the transit union, however, says it is not a long-term solution. He wants new laws passed with stiffer penalties for criminals who attack subway and bus workers.
We need them to understand that we're important, our lives are important, the public safety is important, and they should take that seriously and not just brush us aside.
An MTA customer survey taken a few months ago in the fall found overall subway satisfaction dipped to 52%. It was 56% last spring. But there were improved numbers for safety on the trains and subway stations, both of them up about 3%.
They are safe on the subway system.
Retired NYPD Captain Jim Dooley is a former law instructor at the Police Academy. He also teaches at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. He says the high-profile subway crimes should not deter riders.
They are not symbolic of the system. This is the exception. It's really not the norm.
Danny Pearlstein is with the Riders Alliance, a group that fights on behalf of subway and bus riders. They support congestion pricing because the money raised will be used, for the most part, to upgrade the subway system. They also believe that more people will start taking the subway.
Which means more eyes and ears on the subway, which means more safety.
Linda Schmidt, Fox 5 News.
Now, another major issue the MTA is facing, commuters cheating the system.
The push to crack down on fare and toll evasion before congestion pricing begins.
My patients don't choose to have cancer, but you are choosing to tax them because they do.
None of you want to be in a situation where you might have been saved, but you died because there was too much traffic.
Well, we can't talk about transportation funding without looking at all the revenue currently being lost to fare and toll evasion.
That's right. It's a huge problem for the MTA. Antoine Lewis shows us just how much it's costing the transit agency and what's being done about it.
The MTA says congestion pricing will generate $1 billion in revenue annually. This as long as the toll gets paid by drivers, as collecting for services provided has been problematic for the transit agency. Andrew Ryan is president of the Citizens Budget Commission.
Toll evasion is a problem and it's growing. The MTA and Port Authority each think they're losing $40 million a year.
Last May, the MTA released the findings from a blue ribbon panel it formed to study the financial impact of fare and toll evasion system-wide, and the amount of revenue being lost is massive. In 2022, $315 million was lost on the buses, $285 million on subways, and $44 million on railroads. The MTA's efforts to crack down on fare beaters include modifying subway turnstiles to prevent this, backcocking, pulling the turnstile backwards so that a fare evader can then squeeze through. delaying timers on subway emergency exit doors, and deploying Eagle teams on buses and at subway stops to enforce that fares are being paid. The current proposal for the Central Business District tolling plan, as congestion pricing is officially called, would charge possibly $15 for drivers to enter Manhattan south of 60th Street by scanning vehicle license plates, provided the license plates can be scanned, as license plate fraud continues to be a problem for law enforcement.
The increase in fare and toll evasion is eye-popping, but the MTA has some tools. They're piloting public education campaigns. They're working with the police department, the Port Authority police. They're piloting mobile readers so that people don't always know when they're going to be read.
And just this month, the city and state joined forces to launch a multi-agency task force to crack down on so-called ghost plates that can't be traced by toll cameras. Offenders could be arrested, have their car impounded, or face fines. Governor Hochul is also proposing legislation to increase penalties for toll theft.
Suspending the vehicle registrations of toll evaders is also being touted as a deterrent. But because congestion pricing doesn't only impact New Yorkers, some say that this type of enforcement needs to be regional in order to truly be effective.
But with congestion pricing, of course, there are a lot of people from out of state. We need reciprocity agreements with other states because we can't revoke a New Jersey registration. We need to work with New Jersey, Connecticut. We already have agreements with Massachusetts. It's that kind of cooperation, regional cooperation, that is right.
From Midtown, Antoine Lewis, Fox 5 News.
No easy solutions, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, that wraps up our special, but you can follow all the latest developments on congestion pricing right on our website, fox5ny.com.
Bianca and I will be right back with today's top stories. The 6 o'clock news is next.